morning.
Morning, how we are? What a build-up! Gosh, I've got to live up to a great introduction. I want to meet this person. Wow.
Well, I'm sure everyone is excited to meet you.
Thank you.
It should be really, really good. And I know that you have a bit of a presentation to start off, I believe.
Yes. So the worst thing about being an adult is that you have to do PowerPoint presentations for work. So I've promised I'll do a PowerPoint, but there'll be no words on it, and I won't read off the screen. Let me just make sure I can do this. Morning, everyone. Thank you for being here today. I thought I'd run through a little bit about myself and how I got the job at Guinness World Records, maybe what that job entails, and also give you the chance to ask any questions. So I'll preempt the most asked question, which is what's the weirdest thing I've seen? I'll come to that. But otherwise, yeah, I'd love to hear any of your questions. I'm going to disappear into the corner of your screen, I think, whilst I share this. Yes, can you see this?
Yep, they certainly can. It all
Great.
looks great.
So this is me. I'm Craig Glenday. I'm the editor-in-chief at Guinness World Records. That's me in the middle, just in case you couldn't tell. In fact, with Orbax and Pepper, who are two record holders, they're from Canada, and Pepper, the one on the left of the screen, has the record for placing the most mouse traps against his tongue in 1 minute. Don't ever do this at home. If you have a mouse trap, don't put it on your tongue. It's very painful, as I discovered in this picture. Anyway, this is the picture I use just to introduce myself. So my background is I've always loved books. In fact, there's me as a child, in a safari suit. And from the youngest age, I just remember I loved books. I loved reading. And we never had any books at home, interestingly, when I was growing up. So I used to spend all my time in the library. And I loved just discovering all these great new worlds, particularly to start with fiction. So I loved Tolkien, The Hobbit, and The Lord of the Rings. I loved sci-fi as well. I was a real sort of sci-fi nerd. I love Arthur C. Clarke. He's one of my favorite writers. In fact, I was lucky enough many years later to have a pen friendship with Arthur C. Clarke. So we used to send each other fax messaging, if you remember. Well, you won't remember because you're probably too young. Your teachers will probably remember fax machines where you could send messages over bits of paper. It's very strange. Anyway, I was very lucky to get to meet Arthur C. Clarke. I was also obsessed with computer games. The home computing market was suddenly a very big thing when I was growing up. So I was very interested in how to write video games and playing them and just reading everything I could about them. And I also just generally loved lots of things about trivia, facts, and anything that I could get my hands on, like small little nuggets of information was my favorite type of book. And of course, Guinness World Records. So my first experience of Guinness World Records would have been as a reader back in the 1986 edition. That's how old I am. But had a very cool cover, as you can see, the astronaut cover. And that was my first little foray into the world of record breaking. I could never have imagined back then in 1986 that I'd be here one day, deciding what goes into the book and how it looks. So it's been an amazing time in between, just working up to being employed by Guinness World Records, and then now spending the last 21 years there. And this is where it started, in the library with the Guinness World Records books. The other thing which I think we talked about, talking about creative careers, the other thing that was happening when I was a child, when I was about 10, 11, 12, was the advent of desktop publishing. So this is the Apple, the original Mac. And my school, I was very lucky, my school was on a program where they got these computers in as an experiment. And I just fell in love with them. I loved the idea that you could be creative on a computer. You can draw things and write things on screen. And it was very, very basic, as you can see here. This is Mac Paint and Mac Draw, which were two very, very simple programs for creating things, so drawing pictures, or you could write books, you could make shapes, draw shapes, and you could print them out. So to me, it was a very, very exciting time. And that's when I realized that I really wanted to do a job that involved books, whether writing them, but more importantly, I think making them. So how do you create a book from nothing? So inspired by this, as I at school, I would do the school reports every year. I got to create them for the school. I did things for teachers, posters. I just got very, very into publishing, and then I discovered, just as I was leaving school, that there was a degree course in publishing. You could actually study a degree in publishing, and this was at Napier University in Edinburgh. So I was very excited, and I thought, right, this is the course for me, because I get to learn all about books, how to print them, how to bind them up, how to write them, how to sell them, how to edit them. In fact, if you see on the right there, that whole mess of red scribbles, is part of the British Standards Institute guide on how to edit. So if you're going to be an editor, you have to learn these symbols. It's like a little own private language, hieroglyphics of how to mark up text to say whether it's wrong, whether you need to delete something or change something or edit them. So this is the language of editing, which I was able to learn at university. So it was a great course because it got you involved hands-on, like literally hands-on with printing machines, and getting your hands dirty with inks and, as I say, hand binding books, how to write books, business side of books, marketing books, how to run a bookshop. So it was a very exciting time. I found a picture of me. Like, this is how old I am. Can you see me in this picture? I'm going to save you the time. Here I am. For some reason, wearing a bow tie. I don't know. I was that kid at school that wore a bow tie. I still quite enjoy wearing ties. Anyway, so from this university degree in publishing, learning all about books, we got approached. The university got an approach by a publisher in London saying, does anyone want a job? I was like, well, I would love to work in London. So I took a job, my very first job in publishing, in a place called Marshall Cavendish, which was a magazine publisher. And they specialized in magazines that you build up every week, and you learn a topic over maybe 3 or 4 years, 1 week at a time. And I loved that idea. And the great joy of this job, as my very first job in publishing, is that I got to work on a ton of subjects. So every possible topic, I mean, you could name any word, and I'm sure I would have worked on a part work. They're called part works because they come out in parts. And I got to, as you'll see, there's a selection here of ones I've worked on: Discovery, and then the relaunch of Discovery, a murder magazine, like a true crime magazine, which was amazing, getting to meet lots of really weird, like actual criminals, artists, jazz music, classical music, microwave know-how. That's how old I am. That when microwaves first appeared, people had to buy magazines to know how to use them. Antique guides, and quite a lot of focus on science and educational material. Discovery and Quest were two examples. This is, for example, Quest, which was very encyclopedic, but you build up the encyclopedia, as it says there, every fortnight, and had activities and stuff to do. It was all very bright and colourful, and really was testing my desktop publishing skills there. But I really enjoyed it. My big title, the one that I had most success with, was an amazing magazine called The X Factor. So this is before the TV show, Simon Cowell's TV show. I developed this. This is my baby. I had this idea because I was a fan of the X-Files, and I loved all this weird trivia. So I was able to create a magazine series called The X Factor, which looked at all sorts of weird things: UFOs, ghosts, vampires, secret animals, cattle mutilations, just so many topics. And in fact, I became a bit of an expert, excuse me, on this. And in fact, was commissioned to write a couple of books of my own. So there are 2 books that I've written. I became a UFO and a vampire expert. I didn't ever see myself as being a UFO or a vampire expert, but there you go. In fact, I still have on my shelf. I still have my vampire stakes from a photo shoot we did. Very handy just to have at home, just in case. So it was around about this time I'd worked on lots of different topics, every possible conceivable topic. And where the key is getting to know who are the experts to go to very quickly. That was a very important part of my job, is finding who was the expert and approaching them. I was doing various jobs. I was doing medical photography for a while, because I worked on a medical magazine and needed some photographs. I'm also a musician. I really enjoy playing in bands and orchestras, and I was working in theatres, not surgical theatres, but as in the theatre itself, playing in shows, musicals, in the band. I had lots of things on, and then I got a call, the big important phone call of my career, which is from a friend of mine who worked with me on a children's magazine called Animals, 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 which was about animals. She called me once and said, I've got this job at Guinness World Records. I said, oh my God, I love Guinness World Records. If I could ever have the chance to work there, I would be so happy, because I love trivia, I love knowledge and sharing facts and publishing. It's just, for me, like the world's biggest selling book at the time, copyright book. So I've got to get a job there. So she called me and said the person at the company running the website had won a stand-up comedy competition and was leaving the company. So that next day, I just rushed down to the office with my portfolio, all the magazines and books that I'd worked on or written, and said to the boss, right, you've got to give me a job. I don't care what the job is. I hear there's one going, but you must give me a job. And luckily, they said yes. They liked my CV. They liked that I'd covered so many topics across the last 5 or 6 years of my career. And so they gave me a job. So Guinness World Records, I learned a lot more about the company. It was started in 1955. It was created to solve arguments in pubs. So the idea is that people would be arguing in a pub, and how do you stop the argument? Well, you reach for the Guinness Book of Records, as it was called back then. I joined here just in time to, my first job as editor was for the 2006 edition. So I joined in 2002 as the website editor, and then by 2006 I'd been promoted to the book editor's job, and I've been there ever since. These are my little babies. The most recent one, 2004, isn't on there because the numbers don't work out, but there we go. Oh, this is the one that's just out now. Hopefully some of you will be receiving it for Christmas, I hope. So what is my job at Guinness World Records? Well, my main job is finding the ests from the ists. So ests, superlatives, so words that end in est, really. The biggest, the boldest, the highest, the hungriest, quietest, youngest, weirdest. And I have to collect as many of these things as possible. And I do that. I said before about having a very good set of contacts, knowing lots of people. That's the ists, the archaeologists and the biologists, conchologists, people who study shells, lexicologists who study words. One of my favorite, myrmecologists. Anyone know what a myrmecologist is? A myrmecologist is an expert in ants. So there we go. So if you ever need to find any records or facts about ants, you go to a myrmecologist. So over the years, I've built up this very big contacts book full of all these ists, and that's the job, is asking the ists for the ests. And the idea being is that this turns the heat of argument into the light of knowledge. So that was the original discussion point for the book, is how do we stop people debating and arguing and falling out over things? And how do we turn that heat of the fight into the light of knowledge? So that's where I am today. I've been at Guinness World Records now for 21 years. I hope turning the heat of argument into the light of knowledge. It's been a great joy for me to be able to spend so much of my time meeting the world's most amazing people. I've got some here. There we go. Some of my favorites over the years: the tallest man, that's Sultan Kosen there on the left. He's the one holding the umbrella, obviously. I love meeting astronauts. I was a big space nerd as a kid as well. One of my favorite topics, the sci-fi thing. And I've got to meet Buzz Aldrin, who's the subject of that, probably the most famous photograph, him walking on the moon, taken by Neil Armstrong. And Buzz and Neil were the first humans on the surface of the moon, of course, in 1969. Some other famous people, Michael Jackson, that's Ricky Gervais, and some people who aren't world famous, like there on the bottom right is David Aguilar, and David Aguilar was born basically missing his arm. He'd lost his arm lost in the womb from an unfortunate condition, but he loved Lego, and he decided that he would build his own arm from Lego. And it's now on his, I think, 5 models in. The 5th in. He now has a hand he has made that can flex the fingers. It's an amazing achievement. And David has gone on to study biomechanics at university. So he's taken his love for Lego and playing and toys and creativity. And not only has he made an arm for himself, but he's now studying it as a career. So it's a great application there of a creative skill. A couple more. The world's shortest man at the time, Hugh Jackman. So yes, Alison and I had to hide in Hugh Jackman's toilet in his hotel and surprise him with his certificate because he was the longest serving Marvel superhero. Elaine Davidson there, the most pierced woman. She came to the office one day. Over the many years, she's had about 2,500 different piercings added to her face. And the lovely Peter Glazebrook, who is the man who grows giant vegetables, one of my favorites. Every year I get to go to the giant vegetable competition in Malvern. And I get to weigh giant veg and measure enormous carrots. And Peter is one of the most consistent record breakers. There he is with his 3.76 kilogram potato, which I think is still the heaviest potato ever grown. So yeah, I'm very lucky. These are the world's most amazing, inspiring people, and I get to spend a little bit of time in their life. Writing down, noting what they do, and thinking, how do I turn this into a record? How do I communicate it in the pages of the book so that people will enjoy reading about it, maybe inspire people to break records of their own? So I would say I have the best job in the world, and I think I can say that officially because of my position. So I'm very, very blessed, and I hope when you read the book that you get the enthusiasm that I have for publishing comes across, because it is for me a real privilege to be able to do this. I think that's my last slide, so I'm going to stop sharing. So I feel I just talked at you there endlessly. But yeah, as I said, I feel very lucky to be able to do this job, and what's great as well is that Guinness World Records is such a famous book, such a famous title that everyone knows Guinness World Records. And we hear great things, feedback from families, from kids, just saying how much they love it, how much it means Christmas is coming when you see it in the bookshops. So yeah, it's a very nice honour to be at the centre of this. Sorry, Charlie. Right, should we do some questions?
Yeah, of course. It was really interesting, and enjoy the photographs that you put in there. It was nice to have a look at some of those record holders and see you there with them, giving them their records. I loved it. It was really, really great. And yeah, we have lots of questions for you. So this first one then is, you know, clearly you do so many different types of writing, um, and you're very creative in what you do. I think what you do is, you can't get much more creative writing than the Guinness World Book of Records. So what sort of role does creativity and innovation play in like writing, just any form of writing?
I think you have to play an experiment. So as editors, what we do when we can hire professional writers, but we often find it easier to write it ourselves. And the best way of doing stuff is just actually get it down, just type, 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 and just don't worry about how bad it might be, or just get it on paper, get it, review, and then think, okay, what am I trying to communicate here? We are very restricted at Guinness World Records because every entry in the book, because we're trying to squeeze so many things in, every entry is really short. So here's something on the mermaid. So you get one or two sentences. You have to try and squeeze as much into that, and it has to be fun to read. It has to be something that you can understand quickly. So there's lots of creativity to be had in writing very succinct text, and also in a way that communicates the joy of the record as well. So I can say to you, the world's largest pizza was 800 meters diameter or circumference, and you go, oh, I don't know, is that big? I don't know if that's big or not. But then if you find comparisons for that, you'll find that the biggest pizza was so big that it could be draped over the top of St. Paul's Cathedral. That's how big the biggest pizza was. So you need a bit of creativity to think, how do I make this sound fun? And what would be the weirdest visual image? So that's why if you read the book, we're always coming up with comparisons. I keep a very long list of things, and it's about how tall they are, how wide they are, how heavy they are, and it could be anything from a pen or a mug. How big is that mug? Because you might be able to describe the world's shortest woman as she's the size of 6 mugs. So you at home can get 6 mugs and go, wow, she's tiny. So it's always been about being creative and finding slightly odd ways into things. Like what's the best comparison, or what's the weirdest thing I can think of to put these two together. And there's also creativity we have in terms of coming up with ideas. So mostly the public come to us. We get about 100 applications a day from all around the world. At the busiest times, about 1,000 a week. And there's lots of creativity in that, people coming up. But humans are so crazily inventive. It's really inspiring. But sometimes we need to think of things that they can do because it has to be a record. So we have these creative sessions where we all meet together in the office and come up with what is some fun ideas for records. And we come up with things we see on the internet. We might just find a video on YouTube. Like we have a talent scout called Charlie, and she's always looking for things. And she found, for example, there's a cat and a dog that skateboard together. They go on the same scooter together. So we would have to be creative. Like, how do we turn this into a record? How do we log that so that there is a superlative in it? So yeah, I think the creativity is probably the most important part of the job, because once you learn the rules of English and grammar, that's only a kind of a small bit of it. It's the least important bit. Like I don't even care about spelling. When I'm editing and writing and I'm in the zone, my spelling is terrible, typos, everything. But it's about getting that thought down and being creative, and then you can tidy it up later. And there are professional proofreaders and sub editors. It's their job to turn my mad writing into something that makes sense and is grammatically correct. But it's good to learn. Obviously, learn the grammar as well, kids.
Yeah, interesting you say that though. I think sometimes where you've got an idea, it's definitely easy to get it down on paper in that moment, and
Yeah.
fix it
And keep
later.
a notepad as well. I always have a pencil. I love Blackwing pencils. I'm a bit obsessed with pencils. And I also have a notepad, and I keep things down. On my phone, I've got a thing called Know It All, which is my own list of just anything that I see at any point in the day. I think, wow, that's amazing. I'm going to write it down. I can't read that one. That's too rude. It's about abalone. Abalones have 5 bums, basically. They poo from 5 different places at once, which is interesting. I'm trying to think things I've written down, like strange medical conditions. So the redox syndrome is people who can only see things when they're moving. So if something's moving, they can see it, but as soon as it stops, people stop seeing it. It just disappears for them. This is fascinating, isn't it? I don't know why I write this down, but I just think one day that will be interesting to me.
You must be great fun to have at a party full of fun facts.
Well, and then pub quizzes as well.
Mhm.
We're quite good at pub quizzes. We have a little pub quiz team. They try to put a tax on beards. There's just so many very odd things in here, and maybe 10% will turn into records and end up in the book. Agatha Christie, the world's the most famous crime writer, she was one of the first Europeans to learn to surf. She brought surfing to the UK and made it popular. So people surf in the UK because of Agatha Christie. Who knew?
You learn
So
something
yeah.
new every day.
So always, I think that thing has always been curious. That's where my, if I had guides on how to live life, I think one thing would definitely be always be curious, always be asking questions and trying to work out what things are. And I met, you can see here, am I pointing to it, the head of Bender from Futurama, which is Matt Groening. So I got to know Matt Groening, the creator of The Simpsons. Terrible name drop. In fact, I normally have a name drop bell, so it was my name drop bell. And I said, like, how can you keep on producing The Simpsons after however many, 25 years or whatever? And that's what he said. He said, you just have to be fascinated by everything. And absolutely everything, pop culture and classical references and, Love Island is as important as Shakespeare in some senses, in terms of cultural impact it has at the moment. So just know everything as much as you can. Go to the opera at least once, go to the theatre, eat in a fancy meal in a restaurant, just do all these things, and they'll all tiny little bits that will just make you more interesting and more informed about the world. And then you could then use that information in whatever it is that you want to do and be better at it. So, sorry.
All right, next question then. We have some questions that have come in anonymously, and we'll go with this one because I think this one is a really fun one to start with. So, do you ever have a boring day in the office?
There's a lot of traveling to be done in the job, so I spend a lot of time on trains. I like trains. I prefer to go by train, but I think I'm never bored, because bored just implies that you're sort of switched off and engaged. I think even if you've got a long, an 8-hour train journey, that's an opportunity to read a book or watch a movie or both. And if you've got, as I think I have, this obsession with lots of things, you can never be bored. I don't know. I'm not a bored person, I think, ever. And even when I've done lots of different jobs in my time, and even the weird, like I had a terrible, boring job cleaning industrial tire making machines in a Michelin factory. And it's a terrible job. It's so dull, but somehow you just find the interest out, how does this machine work? Or even what's the best cleaning products to get rubber off machinery, So I feel that there's no boring day really. Boring is just what you make it. You could be, in the middle of the best film, but if you're not paying any attention to it, you'll be bored. I think these things don't help. Being people who are online constantly, the boredom threshold, it takes a lot, less time now to be bored by things if you're not careful. So always be engaged and you will never be bored.
Awesome. So our next question then is, what makes a good portfolio?
Oh, that's a good question. I mean, I look at my portfolio, which I use to get the job here, and it sort of demonstrated as wide a range of things as possible, including I even put in, like, I'm a hobbyist photographer. I like photography. I did it very briefly, as I mentioned. I was a medical photographer for about 2 years, on and off. But I was only ever an amateur photographer. But I put that in as well. I put my pictures in. I put in photographs of things that I did for hobbies, like the music stuff is interesting. All that goes into the portfolio as well. And then I think just the obvious things, which are like just to try and show a variety of different types of writing and how flexible you can be if that's what you want to show off, that you've got the ability to turn a boring bit of copy, a dull bit of copy, into something that's exciting. And put in stuff in your portfolio that isn't published, doesn't matter. It's about the fact that you're doing it. And now as well, everyone can be a publisher. You go online, you can have an account, and you can create your own copy, your own pages. I've seen now, so people who are using YouTube as like authors and writers using YouTube, just reading their content. That's fun as well. So anything that counts, I would just put in the portfolio, because you're never quite sure what the person reading it will take as being interesting. They might discount something that you might think, oh, this is really important. They might not care, and something that you might not think is interesting, but they love because it shows a different side of you. Because ultimately, you're trying to sell yourself. What's your personality like? So that's, I think just variety, and don't be shy. Just put in everything and worry about it later.
Great. Our next questions then, we've had some questions come in from Burnside College. I'm going to ask these two together. So they've asked, what was your favourite subject at school and why? And did you always know what you wanted to do for a career when you were at school?
Yeah, it's interesting. Well, I suppose I really loved three things. I really loved. One was English. I loved English at school. I had a very good English teacher who would share the weirdest thing. It felt like at the time very strange things. Like, we listened to the Goon Show on the radio, which is a radio program from the 50s, maybe 50s and 60s. We watched movies, but with the sound down and frame by frame or shot by shot, to learn about non-verbal communication. He just had a very different way of thinking about the world, and he loved giving us creative writing challenges. So I loved English, and I really enjoyed it and did well. I love music, because the career I would have gone down had I not done publishing would have been music. I was going to study percussion, drums and percussion, at the Academy in Scotland. I did a year at the junior school and realised I didn't really want to study it. I wanted to keep it as a hobby. And it was the best thing. So I think learning music is get to learn music, read music, learn an instrument, because it will just take you places. And I've had so much great experience playing in various bands and orchestras. And that came again from a music teacher who was really good. The importance of having a good teacher. And the third one was the computer science, because it was a sort of new topic. Well, I'm old enough that computers was a new thing in my school. It was very exciting in the 80s when computers turned up, and I just realised this is the future. We will all be on these things, and here we are. And so just get to know it. And again, had a very good teacher, Mr. Davidson, who was really inspiring, and he was also a drummer as well. So we talked about drums stuff, but in these three topics, I really liked. And I remember actually in primary school, we had to fill in this. There was a questionnaire that was sent around, a thing called JigCal, and you answered hundreds of questions about what you liked, and it would give you a recommended job. And at the end of it, I filled all this in. You sent it away. It was done on old computers. And I got back and they said I should be a technical editor, which is effectively what I am. So that was from primary school. So I have always had this into my head that I was going to do something with books. And I didn't care really what it was. I just knew there would be something about books in my career. And, I've been lucky enough to write books, to edit books. And I think I love books. I mean, the most money I've ever spent in the world is on shelves. So this is my little home office, but I've got an embarrassing amount of money spent on shelving throughout the house because I love books and I can't throw a book away. And I love giving books as gifts. They're amazing things to give as a gift. So that's not a hint that Christmas is coming in, that Guinness World Records is now on sale. Do that.
I do have to say that growing up, my brother always got a copy of Guinness World Book of Records for Christmas, and it was a great family tradition to flip through it and look at some new ones. So,
yeah, well, you can still do it. You're never too old. That's the other key, I think, to being creative, and for my job as well is being a child. I'm still like mentally only about 12, and I like all the things that 12-year-olds like, and try and see the world as a child might see it because when you're about 8 years old, I think something changes in your brain, and when you realize you're not the center of the universe as a child, and in fact there's this huge world out there. Everything's amazing. Like, wow, that's amazing. That's the thing that's amazing. And the sad thing is that as you get older and you become cooler, you lose that amazing thing where it takes more and more to impress you. But I've been able to retain, I think, that childhood or childish sense of wonder, really. And I think that's hence keeping lists of things I read about and just being fascinated by everything I see. So I'm very easily distracted as well, as you can imagine. How I ever get any work done, I don't know, but yes, be always curious.
We have time for one or two more questions before we have to end the
So
session.
quick.
Yeah, time passes so quickly when we do these.
Yeah.
All we want is more time. So this next question then has come in anonymously, and it's, how many record attempts fail?
Well, I mean, most people fall at the first hurdle, it has to be said. So we always say contact us first. GuinnessWorldRecords.com, there's a button that says apply. And to be honest, about 95% of these applications fail, or they don't turn into records anyway. They don't become records because they're just too weird, or sometimes illegal, sometimes not good enough. Strange things. One of my favorites is the dog with the fewest legs. So someone applied, said, my dog has the fewest legs. I was like, okay, well, to begin with, it's only got 4. So how many legs has your dog got? It had 3. So it's like 3 legs is still quite a lot of legs for a dog. I've seen quite a lot of 3-legged dogs. I know the Queen had a 2-legged corgi. I've never seen a 1-legged dog, thankfully. And thankfully, never seen a no-legged dog. But once you have no legs, there's nowhere to go. So you can't have minus 1 leg. So we had to say no, obviously. And things like one was the youngest surgeon. So a family gave their son for his 15th birthday the chance to do some surgery because they were surgeons themselves. And obviously that's probably illegal. Longest time staring at the sun, don't do it. It's very bad for you. I can lick my elbow. We get this all the time. I can lick my elbow. It's like, great. So what? Where's the record? There's no S. You need the S to remember. So yeah, most people fail in their applications. But once we go through this, we talk them through, we give them rules and guidelines, then there's more opportunity. So I would say more than half are successful once they get over that hurdle. But yeah, there's a notion that I think you can now do anything to get in the Guinness World Records book, and it's not true. We love to hear the idea. We definitely want to hear all the ideas, but be prepared for us to say, no, sorry, it's not quite right. Everyone gets a nice reply, and we'll try and encourage you to find different records you can apply for based on your skill set. But yes, otherwise, yeah, you will probably statistically fail, but that's okay because life is about failing and just getting back up and doing it again, isn't it? So you go, okay, well, I'll come up with something else.
Certainly. So our final question of today then is another anonymous question, and it's, what has been the hardest part of your career?
Oh, the hardest part. Well, I find it hard to balance like actual real life because there's so much going on. Everything can be a record. And so you're constantly, you never switch off. You go on a holiday to try and relax and get away from work. And then you suddenly think, oh, I wonder if that's the largest statue or, whatever. So that's quite a challenge. I don't know. I've really enjoyed my job, and I enjoy challenges. I enjoy when it's difficult as well because it makes you work harder and think different ways to come up with solutions for things. Um, and what is difficult in the job is when you have to reject people. So I travelled all the way to Mexico. I was in Mexico to meet the world's heaviest man, as it was, and nearby there was a martial artist doing record attempts, and he wanted to try 10 different records for punching wooden batons, and headbutting them, but he wasn't very good. And so I had to spend most of the time with him, just rejecting his ability to smash concrete and wood. And it's really sad to have to say no, that someone's been training all their life for something, and then I turn up and go, nah, reject. That's really hard. But we try and encourage people to get back on the horse, as it were. If you fall off the bike, get back on. And he did finally break a record, which is like, yeah, you got one. So having to say no to things is always very hard. But it's fun.
And on that note, we are heading to the end of our time. So before we wrap up today's session, is there anything that you would like to say to our young people as we say goodbye?
Well, thank you for having me, for one. But I would just say, yeah, I would look at the Guinness World Records book as almost like an instruction manual for how to get on and do life. It's just have a go at as many things as you can. You don't have to be the world's best at anything. You might just be the best in your classroom. You might just be the best in your family. But it's just all about having a go and trying something and setting yourself little goals. Every day you can set yourself a little goal and feel that you've achieved something every day. If you're the best in the world, I think great. Email me. But just about having a go, be curious about the world, and I love books, and I go around bookshops smelling the books. I'm very curious how things smell and look and touch and sound. And I think if you're constantly curious about the world, you'll always be engaged and fascinated by what's going on around you. And there's so much going on. People are so inventive and interesting and fun. There's so much to discover, and it's all in here. You just got to be ready to be learning every day. Every day is a school day, isn't it? We say, and if it's not, then you're doing something wrong because there's so much to learn, and you get great joy from learning these things. That would be it, really. Just be curious.
Well, thank you for joining us, Craig. It's been so good having you, and really, really interesting. Hopefully, our young people have been able to take something away from today's session and can think a little bit more creatively about how they approach their work. So, thank you.
Well, thank you, everyone. Yeah, so thank you for doing this, Charlie. Very good.